It's hard to imagine that a simple Washington quarter, the kind you use every day, could be worth more than a luxury car. But that's exactly what happened with one specific 1981 Washington quarter. A small mistake at the mint, barely visible to the naked eye, turned an ordinary 25-cent coin into a six-figure treasure. The story began with a man named Robert who had been collecting coins since he was a teenager. He didn't collect for profit or investment. He did it because he loved the details, the artistry, the way each coin carried a little piece of American history. Over the years, he'd gathered boxes of quarters, dimes, and nickels, some from circulation, others from coin rolls or estate sales. One rainy Saturday morning, he sat at his kitchen table, sorting through a fresh batch of quarters he'd picked up from the bank. He liked doing this on weekends. It was relaxing, a little routine that always gave him a small thrill when he found something interesting. Most of the coins were ordinary, but then one caught his attention. It was a 1981 Washington quarter. The year alone wasn't unusual. Millions of them were made at the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints. But something about this one didn't look right. The rim seemed thicker on one side, thinner on the other. The date looked slightly distorted, and the lettering on Liberty appeared to have a faint shadow, like it had been doubled. He turned it under the light. There was a gleam to the metal that didn't match the others. The color looked different, almost silvery in a way that reminded him of older pre-1965 coins, which were made of 90% silver instead of the copper-nickel composition used later. But that couldn't be right. 1981 quarters weren't supposed to contain any silver. Robert picked up his magnifying glass and examined the coin closely. The edges had a distinct look to them, not the standard copper sandwich you'd expect to see. They looked pure, seamless. And that's when his pulse started to race. If what he suspected was true, this coin might have been struck on a planchet meant for another denomination. Possibly even on a leftover silver planchet from years earlier. He weighed the coin on his small digital scale. The number blinked. 6.25 grams. His breath caught. Normal clad quarters weigh 5.67 grams. That small difference meant everything. He sat back in his chair, staring at the coin. Could this really be a mint error? Could a simple 1981 quarter have been struck on the wrong metal, creating one of the rarest modern errors ever made? He knew he needed a second opinion. So he wrapped the coin carefully in tissue, placed it in a small plastic holder, and took it to his local coin shop. The owner, a collector named Gerald, had been in the business for decades. When Robert showed him the coin, Gerald's eyes widened. "Where did you get this?" he asked quietly. Robert explained, still unsure what to think. Gerald studied it under his loupe for nearly 5 minutes without saying a word. Finally, he looked up, his voice low but steady. "You might have something very, very special here." He explained that in 1981, during a routine minting run, a few coins had been accidentally struck on leftover planchets meant for foreign coins or older silver issues. These errors were virtually impossible to spot unless someone really knew what to look for. The fact that Robert's coin had the wrong weight, the wrong color, and slight design shifts all pointed toward a genuine mint mistake. "How much could something like this be worth?" Robert asked. Gerald smiled faintly. "If it checks out and grades high, you're looking at $50,000, maybe $60,000. And that's conservative." Robert's mind reeled. $60,000 for a quarter. He decided to have it authenticated by a major grading service. The waiting period felt endless. Each day he thought about that coin, how easily he could have spent it at a gas station or laundromat without ever noticing. Weeks later, the results arrived. The grading company confirmed it. 1981 Washington quarter struck on a silver planchet intended for a foreign issue. Mint state condition. It was official. A legitimate error. And not just any error, one of only a handful ever discovered from that year. Collectors began buzzing about it online. Photos of the coin circulated on numismatic forums. Experts compared die details, mint marks, and weight analysis. Some believed the coin might even have been struck during a short transition phase where leftover planchets were accidentally mixed into production bins. Regardless of how it happened, it was clear that this coin was something extraordinary. Soon after, a well-known auction house contacted Robert. They wanted to feature the coin in an upcoming rare coin event. He hesitated at first. He wasn't sure if he wanted to sell it, but curiosity got the better of him. He wanted to see what the market would say. The day of the auction was tense. Collectors filled the room, some attending virtually, others seated under bright lights. The auctioneer held up the coin, encapsulated in its clear protective holder, the label gleaming, 1981 Washington quarter struck on silver planchet. The starting bid was $20,000. Within seconds, it jumped to 30, then 40, 55. Robert watched silently, hands clasped, trying to stay calm as the numbers climbed. The auctioneer's voice quickened, bidding past 70,000, then 80. A hush fell over the room as it crossed 100,000. The auctioneer glanced around. "Do I have 110? A hand went up near the back. 110,000. Then another voice called out, 120. The room stirred. Collectors whispered, shaking their heads in disbelief. Finally, the hammer came down, sold for $133,200. Robert could hardly breathe. A quarter he'd found in a roll from the bank, something he'd bought for face value, had just sold for over $130,000. After the auction, the story spread quickly. Articles appeared online and in coin magazines, each one emphasizing the same message. Sometimes the rarest treasures are the ones hiding in plain sight. Collectors started looking more closely at their change again, especially quarters from 1981. Theories emerged about how the error occurred. Some believed leftover silver planchets from foreign coin contracts were accidentally mixed into the bins used for domestic quarters. Others suggested the coin might have been struck during a testing phase. Whatever the cause, the result was one of the most valuable and intriguing mint errors of the modern era. In the weeks that followed, Robert received countless messages from collectors and even museum curators who wanted to know more about the discovery. He was humbled by the attention. He never expected fame or fortune, he just liked coins. But his story became a reminder to the entire hobby that even after decades of collecting, new discoveries can still happen. He still kept coin rolls at home, still went through them on quiet weekends. Sometimes he'd smile when he saw a 1981 quarter, wondering how many people had handled that year's coins without realizing one might be worth more than a house. He'd tell friends, "You never know what's hiding in your pocket change. Always look closer." That coin, now preserved in a private collection, remains one of the crown jewels of modern mint errors. Experts still talk about it, how clean the strike was, how rare the combination of features appeared. They say the odds of finding another like it are almost zero. But that's the magic of collecting. Every time you open a roll of coins, there's a small chance you'll find something nobody's seen before. It could be an off-metal strike, a double die, or even a coin struck on the wrong planchet entirely. The thrill of discovery never fades. And for Robert, that thrill became something more. The 1981 Washington quarter taught him that the world is full of small, hidden miracles. All it takes is patience, curiosity, and a little bit of luck. He often thought back to that rainy morning at the kitchen table, when he first noticed something different about that coin. How many people would have missed it? How many times had that coin passed through hands before it reached him? He didn't believe in destiny, but he believed in timing. Maybe that coin was meant to find him. Maybe the universe saves a few surprises for people who take the time to notice the details. Years later, when asked if he missed owning the coin, he always smiled. "Not really," he'd say. "I got to hold it. That was enough." The story of the 1981 quarter continues to inspire collectors around the world. It's proof that even in a world where machines make billions of identical coins, perfection is never absolute. Mistakes happen, and sometimes those mistakes become masterpieces. The 1981 Washington quarter error isn't just a piece of metal. It's a symbol of discovery, of what happens when you look beyond the obvious. It's a story that begins with a single coin and ends with a lesson that never gets old. Don't underestimate the ordinary, because somewhere in a handful of change, a small miracle might be waiting for you too. You might have handled a 1987 Washington quarter thousands of times without giving it a second thought. It's one of those coins that just feels ordinary, familiar face, same silver gray color, the same clink in your pocket. But hidden among those billions of everyday coins are a few that tell a very different story. Coins that, because of one tiny flaw, have become worth more than a luxury car. And the 1987 Washington quarter is one of those rare treasures that in 1987, the United States Mint was producing quarters at an astonishing rate. Both the Philadelphia and Denver mints struck hundreds of millions of them, all bearing the same familiar design: George Washington on the front, the proud American eagle on the back. But every once in a while, something went just slightly off inside the minting presses. A planchet, that small metal disc destined to become a coin, might have come from the wrong batch. A die could have been slightly misaligned, or the metal layers of a clad planchet might have separated just enough to cause a striking error. And that's where things get interesting, because when those mechanical imperfections line up just right, the result is something spectacular. One of the most valuable 1987 quarters ever discovered wasn't struck on a quarter planchet at all. It was struck on a foreign coin blank that somehow got mixed into the system. To the naked eye, it looked strange. The color was different, almost golden in tone, and the edge seemed thinner than normal. The sound it made when dropped on a hard surface was higher and lighter. The first collector who found one of these thought it was just discolored. But curiosity made him take a closer look. When he put it on a precision scale, the weight didn't match the standard 5.67 grams. That's when he realized he might be holding something remarkable. He sent it for certification, and when the grading experts confirmed that it was indeed a 1987 quarter struck on the wrong planchet, the numismatic world took notice. At auction, the bidding started modestly, but as word spread, the price climbed higher and higher until it finally sold for over $49,000. Not bad for a coin most people would have spent without a second thought. And that's just one of the known varieties. Another incredibly rare 1987 quarter error was struck off-center, with nearly 20% of the design missing. These off-center strikes occur when the blank isn't seated correctly in the press, so the die only hits part of it. Most of these coins get caught by quality control, but a few escape into circulation. Those that are severely off-center but still show the date and mint mark can fetch several $1,000s. But when you combine an off-center strike with a wrong planchet or double die, that's when the value skyrockets. There's even a 1987 quarter known to have a dramatic double die error on the obverse, where Washington's profile appears slightly doubled, almost like a ghost image behind the main portrait. Under magnification, you can see it clearly in the word Liberty and around the date. These are subtle, but collectors love them because they capture a literal moment of vibration or misalignment during the minting process, a split second frozen forever in metal. But perhaps the most famous 1987 Washington quarter error is the one that combined multiple issues at once: a misstruck coin on the wrong planchet with a partial collar error. This means the metal didn't fully fill the collar during striking, leaving the edges slightly raised and uneven. When that coin appeared at auction, the bidding was intense. By the time the gavel came down, the final price reached a staggering $122,200. Think about that, a simple 25-cent piece, selling for more than a luxury SUV. All because of a fleeting imperfection at the U.S. Mint nearly 4 decades ago. It's not just about the money, though. For collectors, these errors represent something deeper, a glimpse behind the curtain of an institution built on precision. The Mint is designed to create perfection billions of times over, yet these errors remind us that no system is flawless. Every rare coin like this is a story of chance, of machinery and metal intersecting in just the right way to produce something truly unique. So how do you know if your 1987 quarter might be one of the valuable ones? Start with what you can see and feel. Look for unusual coloration. Anything too light, too dark, or with a golden tint might suggest an off-metal strike. Examine the edges. Are they thinner than normal, or do they lack the usual reeded pattern? Then, check for doubling in the text or the image. Use a magnifying glass and focus on Liberty, Indiana, God We Trust, and the date. If the letters appear slightly shadowed or doubled, you might have something worth investigating. Weight is another key clue. A standard 1987 quarter should weigh 5.67 grams. If it's off by even a few tenths of a gram, it could mean the coin was struck on a wrong planchet. A lighter coin might have been struck on a dime blank, while a heavier one could have been struck on a foreign coin planchet. And don't forget about alignment. If the reverse doesn't perfectly line up with the obverse when you flip it over, that misalignment itself can be an indicator of value. But here's the thing that makes these stories so captivating. These valuable coins aren't all locked away in private collections. Some are still out there waiting to be discovered. Over the years, countless error coins have turned up in the most ordinary places: coin rolls, cash registers, even change jars at home. One collector reportedly found his six-figure 1987 quarter while sorting through old coins left in a family drawer. He almost spent it before noticing the odd tone on the rim. That one glance changed everything. The thrill of discovery is what keeps the coin collecting community alive. It's not just about profit. It's about history, curiosity, and the simple wonder of realizing that even something as mundane as pocket change can hide a treasure. When you think about it, every coin is a tiny piece of the country's story, minted in metal and passed through millions of hands. The rare ones, though, the flawed ones, are like misprinted pages in a great novel. They remind us that perfection isn't what makes something valuable. It's the anomaly, the error, the beautiful imperfection that sets it apart. Even after decades, the 1987 Washington quarter continues to surprise collectors. Each new discovery sparks fresh excitement. Grading companies like PCGS and NGC keep detailed records of known varieties, and each one that surfaces adds to the coin's lore. Some have faint doubling, others have weak strikes, and a few are struck so far off-center they look almost abstract, like pieces of accidental art. Every single one of them tells a unique story. The truth is, most 1987 quarters will never be worth more than 25 cents. But every so often, a rare survivor emerges from the crowd, untouched, unrecognized, waiting for someone to notice. And that's why collectors still search, still study, still hope. Because the next great discovery might be sitting unnoticed in a coffee can of loose change, or in the drawer of a cash register somewhere. If you find one that seems unusual, don't clean it, ever. Leave it exactly as it is and get it evaluated by a professional. Cleaning a coin, even gently, can strip away tiny details that are essential for grading. Collectors value authenticity and originality above all else. The slightest alteration can mean the difference between a few dollars and a fortune. When you hold an error coin like the 1987 quarter, you're holding more than just money. You're holding a story, a glimpse of imperfection that somehow became extraordinary. You're holding evidence that even in a world of machines, human curiosity can still uncover something miraculous. And maybe, somewhere out there right now, another one of those rare 1987 quarters is waiting to be found. It could be in a dusty coin roll, in the pocket of an old jacket, or resting unnoticed in a jar on a kitchen counter. That's the beauty of it. You never know until you look closely. Because sometimes, the difference between a 25-cent coin and one worth $122,000 comes down to nothing more than a tiny mistake, and the eyes that are sharp enough to see it. You ever look at an old quarter and think, it's just change? Well, sometimes that little coin sitting in your hand, something you've probably ignored hundreds of times, could be worth more than a brand new car, or even a small house. Pause, and that's exactly the case with a few rare 1995 Washington quarters that turned out to be worth as much as $42,000, even $118,500. Now, at first glance, a 1995 quarter looks completely ordinary. Same portrait of George Washington. Same eagle reverse on the back. Same silvery shine. But a few of them have a secret, a minting error so rare, so visually striking, that when collectors discovered it, the entire coin community took notice. Pause, because this was no small scratch or minor misalignment. These were full-blown minting anomalies that shouldn't have existed at all. Let's rewind to 1995. The U.S. Mint was producing hundreds of millions of quarters across its Philadelphia and Denver facilities. The presses ran day and night, churning out coin after coin, trying to meet circulation demand. Everything had to be precise: temperature, pressure, alignment. But sometimes, just sometimes, a tiny mistake in that process can create a miracle point. One of those miracles was the double die obverse, a striking error that caused Washington's profile, the inscriptions, and even the word liberty to appear doubled. Not a faint shadow, not a soft blur, but sharp, visible doubling that made the coin look almost three-dimensional. And for those who know what they're looking at, that kind of doubling changes everything. Imagine this. A man in Ohio goes through his pocket change one night, dumping it all out on the table like he's done 1,000 times before. He's half distracted, watching TV, just sorting out a few coins to roll up. Then he stops. Something about the quarter catches his eye. He squints, turns it in the light. "Wait!" he mutters. The word liberty looks strange. He grabs a magnifying glass, and there it is, every letter doubled. George Washington's "I" seems to have a ghost image right beside it. His heart starts pounding. He does a quick search online. Then another. Pause. Could it be one of those? One of the rare double-die quarters he'd read about years ago? He sends it off to be graded, barely daring to hope. Weeks later, the confirmation comes back. 1995 Washington quarter, double-die obverse. And when it hits auction, that same coin sells for nearly $60,000. Now, that's just one kind of error. Others are even stranger. Some 1995 quarters were struck on the wrong metal, planchets intended for other denominations, like dimes or foreign coins. These off-metal strikes are wild to see. They can be thinner, lighter, or even a completely different color, goldish or pale gray instead of standard-clad silver. One of the most famous examples was discovered in a coin roll. A collector noticed that one quarter looked smaller than the rest. It didn't quite fill the slot in a coin holder. When he weighed it, it came in at 4.9 grams instead of 5.67. The test confirmed it had been struck on a foreign planchet, possibly a 10-cent blank meant for another country's mint order. That tiny mistake? It turned a 25-cent coin into a 5-figure prize. By the time it hit the market, bidding went crazy. Collectors from all over the country were watching. The auctioneer started at $20,000, and in seconds it doubled. The energy in the room was electric. Auction murmurs. 40,000, 55,000, 70,000. And finally, the hammer dropped at $118,500. One quarter, worth more than most people's yearly salary. The crowd gasped. Even seasoned dealers were shaking their heads, whispering, "How does something like that even happen?" Here's how. You see, every coin begins as a blank called a planchet. These planchets are stored in large bins and moved between different presses for various denominations. Once in a while, when the mint is switching from one type of coin to another, a few blanks from the previous batch get left behind. They slip through unnoticed. So, when the press starts striking the next batch, say quarters, one of those wrong blanks sneaks in. The dies strike it, imprinting the quarter design onto the wrong metal. And just like that, an ultra-rare error is born. The thing is, these mistakes aren't caught right away. Most go straight into circulation. They end up in cash drawers, vending machines, or parking meters. Some travel across the country before anyone notices. That's what makes discovering one so thrilling. It's like hunting for buried treasure in plain sight. But off-metal errors aren't the only kind found in the 1995 Washington quarters. There were also dramatic misstrikes, coins struck off-center, where parts of Washington's head are missing or the date is cut off at the edge. Others show what collectors call broad strikes, where the coin was struck without the collar that shapes its edge, causing it to spread out, thinner and wider than usual. There's even a small number of 1,995 quarters with cladding errors, where the top nickel layer didn't bond correctly, exposing the copper core beneath. It gives the coin a strange, two-tone look, almost like a bronze medal. And of course, some of these were found completely by accident. Take one story from California. A retired teacher, sorting through her laundry change. She notices one quarter looks a little off, slightly thicker than usual. She tosses it in a jar, meaning to check later. Weeks pass. Then one day, she's watching a news story about rare minting errors, and something clicks. She digs the coin out, wipes it clean, and takes a closer look. The date seems oddly doubled. She brings it to a local dealer, who stares at it for a long moment before saying, "Ma'am, I think you just found something very special." That coin turned out to be a dramatic double die. After grading, it sold for over $42,000. And here's the thing, that wasn't even the best specimen. The finest known 1995 Washington quarter error, graded in near-perfect condition, sold for $118,500. That's the kind of number that makes even non-collectors pay attention. Now, it's important to understand that not all 1995 quarters are valuable. Most are worth face value. But the errors, the double dies, the off-center strikes, the off-metal planchets, those are what make collectors' hearts race. So how can you tell if you might have one of these treasures? First, check for doubling. Hold the coin under good light and tilt it gently. Look at Liberty, In God We Trust, and the date. True doubling will look sharp, like a second impression slightly offset, not a blur. Second, pay attention to the coin's color and texture. If it looks dull gold, light copper, or darker gray than normal, it might be an off-metal strike. Third, weigh it. A standard 1995 quarter should weigh exactly 5.67 grams. Anything lighter or heavier could indicate a wrong planchet. And finally, check the edges. Off-center strikes and broad strikes often have incomplete or missing reading, the small grooves that normally run around the rim. Collectors love these coins because they're unpredictable. You can't fake the way these errors happen. Each one tells a story of timing, chance, and imperfection sneaking through a system built for perfection. There's something poetic about that, isn't there? A coin designed to be ordinary becomes extraordinary because of a single flaw. You think about all the hands that coin might have passed through. Maybe it was spent at a gas station, a grocery store, a toll booth. Maybe someone used it without a second thought. And then, years later, someone else looks closely enough to see the difference. That's when history wakes up. The 1995 Washington quarter marks one of the last years before the state quarter program began. A transition between eras. It represents the end of the classic eagle reverse, the last breath before the mint completely redesigned America's circulating quarters. In that sense, it already has a certain nostalgia to it. Add a rare error, and it becomes almost mythic. Collectors say the thrill of finding one is unlike anything else. It's not just the value, it's the story, the moment of realization, that heartbeat of disbelief when you think, wait, this can't be real. Pause, and yet it is. So next time you're holding a 1995 Washington quarter, take a second look. Turn it over in the light. Listen to the sound it makes when you drop it on a table. Feel the texture, the weight, because just maybe you're holding something incredible, something that slipped through the cracks of minting perfection, a little piece of American history that shouldn't exist but does. And who knows, it might just be the one that turns out to be worth $42,000 or even $118,500. After all, every great discovery starts with someone who looked a little closer.